Many thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Good Morning Namibia on this lovely Tuesday morning. Now, free, fair and credible elections are realized from the collaborative efforts of various electoral stakeholders in promoting the integrity of the election process and the respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Now, based on the above, the regional workshop on the information ecosystem and elections in Africa is set to take place from today, the 23rd, until tomorrow, the 24th of July, 2024. And with more information on this, I'm joined in studio by Hilda Modisane, who is the Executive Secretary at the Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC countries. And she's joined alongside Hlengiwe Dube, who is the Expression Project Manager at the who's the Expression Project Manager for Information and Digital Rights Unit from the University of Pretoria, as well as that's Dr. Emmerentia Leonard, who is the Commissioner with the Electoral Commission of Namibia. Ladies, a very good morning and welcome to Good Morning Namibia.
Thank you.
How are we doing today?
We're doing very well.
Fantastic stuff. Ms. Dube, perhaps we can start with you. Talk to us about this regional workshop, its aims and objectives, yes.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having us. So the workshop is starting today, 23 July, and tomorrow, 24 July. And the workshop is on the information ecosystems in African electoral systems. And essentially, we are saying that, there's a lot of electioneering that's taking place on the continent. A number of countries have already had their elections, and some are still coming up, including in Namibia. And in the context of an election, what we are saying is that in as much as we have other considerations, information is a very important element which determines the quality of an election or the integrity of an election. To say an election is free, fair, credible, transparent, we also need an aspect of information. And when you're looking at information ecosystem, we're looking at a number of things. There's access to information, but access to credible information, not any information. We are also looking at freedom of expression, which is a fundamental right for the exercise of the right of political participation. We are also looking at emerging issues such as misinformation, disinformation. We are looking at the impact of digital technologies as well, such as the use of social media. But in all these considerations, we also take into account the protection of personal information. So that is the essence of the workshop that we'll be having today and tomorrow.
Indeed, very much indeed. Fantastic. Ms. Modisane, just perhaps you can talk to us about your hopes and expectations from this workshop as well. And perhaps talk to us about the Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC countries and your involvement in this workshop.
Okay. Thank you very much for having us. Perhaps let me start by sharing what this forum is all about. It's a regional platform comprising of all electoral management bodies of the SADC member states. It provides a platform for these commissions to learn from each other, to support one another, to advise, if you like, on electoral matters. So it's quite an important platform because it is from this forum that we can document lessons learned, we share experiences, and we even share resources in the form of knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, because then it encourages commissions to resource each other instead of maybe going outside the region.
Absolutely.
Now, what do we expect from this workshop? Of course, I've indicated that it is through this platform that commissions learn from each other. We expect that during these 2 days, election management bodies and other international organizations will share on how or what strategies they have in place in relation to access to information, freedom of expression. What challenges do they face? What are the opportunities? So we expect that maybe after these 2 days, we should be having what we would have taken stock of what is happening in the various countries. What are the best practices? In particular, how can we assist the remaining 4 countries to hold elections? That is Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, and Mauritius.
Fantastic. And of course, Namibia is here in the House, being represented by Dr. Leonard this morning, Commissioner with the Electoral Commission of Namibia. First and foremost, how important a workshop is this for Namibia, especially with our elections a few months away? Yes.
Yeah, this workshop is because information is the basis for an informed electorate to participate efficiently in elections, and that is in fact the foundation of our democracy, to ensure that everyone has got equal and credible information in order to be able to make the choice in terms of their vote. So this workshop basically comes at an opportune time while we as a country are busy preparing ourselves for elections. We had our elections since 1989, and I could say that we really had free, fair, and credible elections ever since. But there is always room for improvement and learning of new opportunities, and what would be the best platform than this, where we are meeting with regional and international stakeholders within the field of elections and learn from their experiences, but in the same vein also share our experiences, because as a country we had quite a lot to offer and to share in terms of the space of democracy and the holding and conduct of credible, fair and free elections.
Very much indeed. Ms. Dube, I just want to quickly perhaps look at neighborly South Africa, where you come from. You, of course, represent the Expression Project. You're the manager for the Expression Project within the Information and Digital Rights Unit at the University of Pretoria. Your country, South Africa, held their own elections not too long ago. We've seen the outcome of those elections. Just reflecting on that electoral process and perhaps some of the lessons or things that you'd like to point out from that election. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Just to restate that from the Center for Human Rights, which is based at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. Yes, South Africa had its elections recently, and it's been quite an interesting election. I think everybody in the region and on the continent was looking forward to that election. But within the context of this conversation, I think what we can learn from South Africa is that in terms of information, there's good practice that can be learned there. The electoral management body, to start with the electoral management body, in terms of access to information, I think using the frameworks that we have continentally, they kind of tick the boxes. They were, if you go to the website of the Electoral Commission, you will be overwhelmed with information, credible information. There's a lot of information by the Independent Electoral Commission. But also, the Independent Electoral Commission has also taken some initiatives to engage with stakeholders such as civil society organizations, such as the media, such as the information regulator, in responding to emerging issues that are threats to the information ecosystem or the integrity of information, which is misinformation and disinformation. And specifically, the Center for Human Rights itself had a partnership with the IEC on an information-specific project which was promoting access to information. And they also did the same with the South African National Editors Forum, Media Monitoring Africa, and other stakeholders. And also, the IEC itself has a very good relationship with the media, which is a very good thing, which promotes freedom of expression. It also promotes access to information. But also, looking at the national broadcaster, South African, yes, the SABC, it also played a very important role. I'm specifically referring to SABC because it's the national broadcaster, publicly funded. It served the different facets of society, not aligning themselves maybe to one political side, but you had that multiplicity of voices through the national broadcaster. But there was also, because of the media pluralism, media diversity, you find that there's free space for expression, and contestation of ideas is also something that is promoted and which is also encouraged.
Very much so. And of course, definitely some lessons that Namibia, Botswana, Mauritius, Mozambique, as perhaps smaller sisters to South Africa can learn from the events there. Ms. Modisane, let's take a look at perhaps some of the guidelines and issues that will be unpacked during this regional workshop taking place today and tomorrow here in Namibia. Yes.
Okay, we do have a number of guidelines. We start with the African Commission framework itself on the access to information, freedom of expression. We also have the revised SADC principles governing democratic elections. We do have the principles and guidelines on election management, monitoring in the SADC region, popularly known as the PEMO. There are a number of them, African Charter on Democracy on Elections. These guidelines give a framework, in fact also recommendations on how election management bodies and other stakeholders can handle issues around access to information. I can confirm that the Electoral Commission's Forum will deploy observer missions to these 4 countries, and these are some of the instruments that we will use in terms of gauging where EMBs are and what areas they can improve. Obviously, we'll be looking at things like the legal framework. We'll look at issues around voter registration, whether it is accessible, the voters' roll is accessible, the quality of the voters' roll, very, very important. We'll look at issues around voter education, what initiatives have been put in place. We'll also look at issues around funding. Where do EMBs get their funding? Do they talk to stakeholders about where they get funding? That relates to access to information. More importantly, we're going to look at how election management bodies package information for observers. If you go into a country, if we come to Namibia, do we have access to the Constitution?
As
do we have access to the Electoral Act?
Yeah.
You know, things like how is it packaged?
Absolutely.
Is there use of technology in terms of how the packaging is? So there's a whole list, we call it a checklist, that we look
Sounds
at
like a very long
versus,
list.
versus what is contained in the guidelines.
Fantastic stuff.
Yes.
Dr. Leonard, hearing our stakeholders from the forum and from South Africa talk to us about the relation, especially when it comes to access to information, perhaps you can give us an understanding of the Electoral Commission of Namibia as far as access to information and providing that information is concerned. Yes.
Yeah, as Hilda has mentioned, electoral observers and monitoring missions are amongst the stakeholders that would have access to information. And all the aspects that were mentioned in terms of the Electoral Act, the voter education, the inspection of the voter roll, all of that is made available, not just to the electoral missions and monitor, but even to any interested person. And in the Electoral Act, it states, for example, the voters' roll would be open for inspection after our registration of voters ends on the 1st of August, yes. Yep. And the Electoral Act 5 of 2014 mandates us to have it open for inspection by any registered voter in Namibia. And that is amongst the aspects that we say where we provide access to information. Our websites, we have really made a big stride in ensuring that information around elections and the electoral processes are available on our social media platforms, the website, and other information platform that could be available.
Yes.
So, and as you know, earlier in this year, we launched our electoral calendar that basically guides all aspects.
Yes.
This pertains to the preparations and the conduct of the election. That was a public document, and it still remains a public document. And yeah, it is shared with anyone of interest, and they can then use that document to track the process of how we are busy preparing ourselves for the elections in November.
Yes.
Voter education is one aspect that was also highlighted. We have managed to establish regional electoral offices in all our 14 political regions of our country. We are busy strengthening them up, but we have seen with the current GRV, which is underway, that they really have played a pivotal role in ensuring that our electorate is informed about where the registration points are, the documentations that are needed for registration, and any other information that people would be, or our electorate would be requiring to make an informed choice, because without them, there wouldn't be an ECN.
Exactly.
And that's why we are here. So we are really taking all strides possible to make sure that information is available, both for our internal stakeholders, meaning our electorate within the country, as well as the national, international and regional stakeholders within the electoral space.
I'd like to briefly talk about the issue of voter apathy, which faces a lot of electoral bodies across the region. Just looking at South Africa recently, I mean, you had around 27 million registered voters, but only around 16 million people showed up at the polls. Obviously, I think this workshop will also cover this aspect. Ms. Dube, perhaps we can hear from you firstly. What do you make of the issue of voter apathy, and how can we bring people, the electorate, to the polls through workshops like this here?
Thank you so much. I'm not sure whether I know the strategies around how to bring them to the polls.
Because it doesn't seem to be working yet.
Yes, indeed. Like across the continent, it's really a big issue, the issue of voter apathy. If you look at South Africa, the registered voters, in terms of those who actually turned out, there was a significant difference. But I just want to just highlight the issue of young people. Young people, there's this phrase that was being thrown around during the South African elections, that there is democracy fatigue. Democracy fatigue, meaning, South Africa has attained democracy in 1994, and you've been voting all these years after every, electoral cycle, and young people will be like, what have we gained? Especially the Gen Zs, you have been voting and voting, what have we gained? What is the point? And that was also conversation linked to issues around diminishing returns as far as socio-economic issues are concerned, looking at, the economic status, unemployment, service delivery, and all that. So those are some of the issues that probably led to people not having an interest in elections. Like the going to the polls was not translating into what they had envisaged. So hence that for the apathy. But during the workshop, we're going to have one of the sessions focusing on vulnerable and marginalized groups. And one of the groups that we're specifically focusing on is that of young people. And I'm glad that the speaker for that panel is from here in Namibia, and who is going to share perspectives, not just on the continent, but specifically on Namibia, considering that, the elections are coming up. Maybe Namibia will have a different representation or experience of the participation of young people. And I think it's a very important demographic to look at. And it's very worrying, actually, that young people are not actively participating in elections. And I think it's something that needs to be actively tackled.
Absolutely. Yeah. Ms. Modisane, as a forum, how big of a concern is this for the forum? Yeah?
It is a big concern. All electoral commissions are experiencing that. One of the areas that the forum encourages election management bodies to do is to undertake research. Which will then inform what strategies we can put in place. Countries like Botswana, they were able to do what they call voter apathy study, just to find out why people don't register, what can be done, what do people want.
Yes.
And as we move on with the times in this era of technology, we realize that perhaps one of the areas that EMBs can try is to also use technology to
appeal.
To appeal, yes. We've seen how in the recent elections in South Africa, the introduction of online voter registration, IEC was able to increase its number of young, is one of the entry points.
Yes.
And so it's something that we need to unpack and see how relevant it can be to other countries.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Leonard, what methods, what strategies is the ECN adopting to ensure that young people do come to the polls come November?
Amongst the activities high on our agenda is this apathy, voter apathy research that we would also like to conduct.
Fantastic.
To really get an understanding of why the participation in elections are diminishing over there, more especially for the regional and local authority elections.
Absolutely.
That's where the biggest low turnout is for our voters. As of yesterday, we had about 71% GRV registration, and that is just the registration.
Yes.
Even in South Africa, we saw that the registration rates, the percentage was quite high, but then the actual participation in the election,
It's quite
that's
low.
where it was low. And knowing that our population is youthful,
Yes.
workshops such as these would perhaps help us to really devise strategies in terms of how we can reach out to those that we really want to participate in the elections come November 2024. So it is really an issue that we are also battling with, and it is in the back of our mind as we are planning. And as an electoral management body, we really involve all our stakeholders, the political parties, organizations, associations, the CSO and such, for us to put our heads together and to take out the message that the next step after the registration would be the participation in elections. But the political parties also have a big role to play in this, to really encourage their members to come to the polls.
Absolutely, 100%. Ms. Dube, as organizer of this workshop, you have the last say this morning. Your final word to stakeholders and the electorates of Namibia.
Yes, thank you so much. It's a very important engagement from the fact that Namibia is hosting. But also the fact that there's an election that is coming up, and I think the workshop is going to be very important in that context. Yeah. So we are not only having electoral commissions and observers and missions, we also have academic experts that we have. We have democracy experts, we have media experts as well as part of that. And the workshop is not designed to educate election observers how to be observers, or EMPs how to be EMPs, is to say that in the work that they are already doing very well, we hope, we are encouraging them to actively mainstream issues of information rights into the work that they do, and take into account some of the frameworks that have been developed at sub-regional level and also continental level. And just to highlight that, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights developed guidelines on access to information and elections in Africa in 2017, which is basically a roadmap or a guide on how electoral stakeholders can proactively disclose credible information in the context of an election. But we also have a declaration of principles on freedom of expression and access to information in Africa, which is also a document that encapsulates the state obligations as far as access to information and freedom of expression is concerned, and also underlying that these rights are supposed to be enjoyed online and offline by everybody, but also underlying or underscoring the issue of non-discrimination. Yes. That these rights in the freedom of expression and access to information within an electoral context should be enjoyed by everybody, regardless of who they are, whether it's their sex, it's their gender, whether they have a disability or not, and whether they are in a rural community or not, and other considerations. And I'm glad that we are going to have something dedicated for vulnerable marginalized groups. Yes. To just highlight the important element of non-discrimination and inclusion. Yeah.
Definitely a robust conversation is going to be happening over the next 2 days. Thank you so much for being here, and all the best with this important workshop. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us this morning.
There you have it. That was Ms. Hlengiwe Dube, who is the manager for the Expression Project under the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, joined by Ms. Hilda Modisane, who is the Executive Secretary for the Electoral Commissions Forum of SADC countries, as well as Dr. Emmerentia Leonard, who is a commissioner here with the Electoral Commission of Namibia. They'll be forming part of a regional workshop on the information ecosystem and elections in Africa, taking place today and tomorrow. Do stay with us.